To understand the myths, you first have to understand the German advance in the summer of 1942. As part of a grand strategy called Case Blue, Hitler's war machine turned its sights on the city bearing his rival's name, Stalingrad. Taking it was a strategic goal, meant to cut off Soviet supply lines and seize vital oil fields. But for Hitler, it was also deeply personal. On August 23, 1942, the German Luftwaffe unleashed an air attack that turned most of the city into a sea of fire and rubble. Over 40,000 civilians were killed in that first week of bombing alone. And contrary to the idea that the city was evacuated, hundreds of thousands of civilians, mostly women and children, were trapped. The authorities had delayed the evacuation, leaving them to fend for themselves in a city that had become a slaughterhouse. They were the unsung witnesses to the horror, forgotten by their own government and ignored by the propaganda that came later. Hollywood gives us a landscape of ruined but distinct buildings. The reality was a flattened, featureless hellscape. The German Sixth Army, under Friedrich Paulus, expected a quick victory. Instead, they walked straight into a meat grinder. The Soviets turned every pile of rubble into a fortress, every sewer into a sniper's nest. This wasn't a battle of clear front lines. This was the Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. Soldiers from both sides might be on different floors of the same building, firing at each other through holes in the ceiling. A single railway station changed hands 14 times in just 6 hours. This was a fight for inches and rooms, and every foot gained cost a terrible price. This brings us to maybe the most famous cinematic myth of all, the duel between Vasily Zaitsev and the German Major Erwin König, the supposed head of the Wehrmacht's sniper school. In Enemy at the Gates, this cat-and-mouse game is the very heart of the battle. Now, Vasily Zaitsev was absolutely a real person and an incredible sniper. He was credited with over 225 kills during the battle and became a hero of the Soviet Union. He and his fellow snipers were a genuine threat to the Germans, whose own records are full of complaints about their deadly accuracy. But what about his arch-nemesis, Major König? The truth is, there's no proof he existed. German military archives have no record of a Major König, or anyone with a similar name like Thorvald, ever being sent to Stalingrad. The Berlin sniper school he supposedly ran didn't even exist at that point. The story of the duel comes almost entirely from Zaitsev's own memoirs, which were heavily influenced by Soviet propaganda. Think about it. The story of a simple shepherd from the Urals outsmarting an aristocratic German master sniper was the perfect tale to boost morale. It took a vast, anonymous conflict and personalized it into a simple story of us versus them. While Zaitsev certainly fought and killed German snipers, the epic, multi-day duel against one specific legendary opponent is almost certainly a myth, created to inspire a nation on the brink of collapse. Probably the most shocking scene in Enemy at the Gates is the one where terrified Soviet conscripts are pushed off trains, given a rifle to share between 2 men, and ordered to charge German machine guns. Those without rifles are told to just pick one up from a fallen comrade. When they retreat, they're cut down by their own side, the infamous blocking detachments. This single image has defined how the West sees the Red Army, as a brainwashed, disposable horde. But is it true? The short answer is no, not really. Weapon shortages were a real issue, but that was mainly in the chaotic early months of the invasion back in 1941, long before Stalingrad. By late 1942, the Soviets' problem wasn't a lack of rifles. It was a dire shortage of trained soldiers after the massive losses of the previous year. The scene as shown of deliberately sending thousands of unarmed men into a charge is a cinematic invention. The blocking detachments were also real, authorized by Stalin's infamous Order No. 227, the not one step back order. And yes, they could shoot panicked soldiers or deserters, but their role is wildly exaggerated in movies. They weren't lined up behind every attack, ready to mow down their own men. Their main job was to catch soldiers who got lost or were retreating without orders and send them back into the fight. Some executions did happen, but it was nothing like the indiscriminate slaughter you see on screen. For a commander like General Chuikov, whose 62nd Army was desperately defending the city, every soldier was precious. He simply didn't have men to waste on mass executions. The order was more of a psychological weapon, a brutal way of telling every soldier there was no ground left to give. The real turning point at Stalingrad wasn't just about grit and sacrifice inside the city. It was about something much bigger, a strategic masterstroke that happened miles away from the rubble. We'll get into that right after this. If you're enjoying this look into history, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It really helps us bring more of these hidden stories to light. Hollywood loves to focus on the drama inside the city, the house-to-house fighting, because it looks great on camera. But the battle wasn't won in the ruins of the Red October tractor factory. It was won on the vast, frozen plains outside the city. While the German Sixth Army was being bled dry in the Rat War, the Soviet High Command, led by Marshal Georgy Zhukov, was quietly planning a massive counterattack, Operation Uranus. The plan was incredibly audacious. The Germans had relied on their weaker Romanian and Italian allies to protect the long, stretched-out flanks of their army. That was the weakness the Soviets decided to hit. Starting in September 1942, the Red Army began a huge, secret buildup of forces on those flanks, gathering over 1 million soldiers, 900 tanks, and thousands of artillery pieces. They moved all this equipment with incredible stealth, even building bridges underwater to avoid being spotted by German planes. The Germans, completely obsessed with capturing the symbolic prize of the city, totally missed the storm gathering on their horizon. On November 19, 1942, the Soviets struck. Two massive pincer movements, one from the north and one from the south, smashed right through the Romanian armies. In just 4 days, the pincers met at the town of Kalak, west of Stalingrad. The trap was sprung. The entire German Sixth Army, around 300,000 men, was now encircled, cut off, and surrounded. This was the true turning point. It wasn't a sniper's bullet. It was a brilliant, large-scale maneuver that proved the Red Army could outthink and outfight the Wehrmacht. It showed that Stalin was finally learning to trust his generals. In the movies, death in war is often a heroic sacrifice, a quick, meaningful end. For the men of the Sixth Army trapped inside the Stalingrad cauldron, or Kessel, it was anything but. Hitler, in a moment of pure arrogance, forbade any attempt to break out and promised he would supply the army by air. That air bridge was a complete disaster. The trapped soldiers were left to their fate, slowly descending into a frozen hell. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a mass death event driven by starvation, disease, and frostbite. Soldiers were eating rats, mice, and in some horrific cases, each other. The cinematic focus on individual heroes completely misses this larger, more gruesome truth. The victory at Stalingrad was built on a foundation of anonymous suffering on an almost unimaginable scale. The battle caused nearly 2 million casualties combined for both sides, military and civilian, making it arguably the bloodiest battle in all of human history. When the Germans finally surrendered on February 2, 1943, only about 91,000 of the 300,000 trapped soldiers were left alive to be marched off to prison camps. Most would never see Germany again. So why do the Hollywood myths stick around? Because they're simpler. They give a vast, incomprehensible tragedy a human face. A story about a sniper duel is much easier to digest than the complex logistics of Operation Uranus. A hero's death is more comforting than a slow, agonizing slide into starvation and cannibalism. But the real legacy of Stalingrad isn't in the myths. It's in its brutal reality. It was a war of attrition that shattered the myth of German invincibility. It was a turning point won by Soviet strategic planning, industrial might, and the almost superhuman endurance of its people. Above all, it's a stark reminder of the catastrophic human cost of total war, a cost that movies often clean up for us. The legend is dramatic, but the reality is far more important. And that's a reality we should never forget. Thanks for watching. What other historical events do you think Hollywood gets wrong? Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.